Well, thank you all for joining us today for another one of our webinar calls. I think we've all come to agree that these are a lot of fun and a great way to get just wonderful information that impacts the Koolen-de syndrome family. So glad you all have joined us. I know a lot of you are watching live through Facebook, and just really want to thank you too for taking time out to join us. We just really appreciate you tuning in. I'm Kaci, and I'll be your host again today on behalf of the Koolen-de Syndrome Foundation. I am mom to Hudson, who is 11 this month and was diagnosed with KdVS just about, I think about 5 years ago. And also, for the sake of this conversation, I think it's important to point out that I also have a daughter, and so Hudson has a younger sibling. And I was just telling Bea before you all jumped on how thrilled I am to hear from her today, and I know you all will be too, because the information she shares is just so relevant and it's so useful immediately. So you are in for such a treat. Let me tell you a little bit about Bea, and then Bea, I'll give you a minute to say hello. She is well-credentialed. She's a total rock star. Bea is a board-certified cognitive specialist, parenting coach, author, and national speaker. She created a childlike mind to educate parents of children with unique, atypical brains that have both behavior and learning needs, while giving them the tools they need to be successful at home. Bea has written for Autism Parenting Magazine, Charlotte Parent Magazine, Different Brains, Parents, PBS Kids, The Every Mom, and Verizon. Then that's to name a few. She is respected and trusted as a parenting coach and a consultant in Charlotte, North Carolina, and surrounding areas. She enjoys the delightful feeling of facilitating the needs of children to feel successful in their learning, emotional and social well-being, academic success, and to have a positive self-esteem. The most rewarding part of her day is when she has equipped parents with the tools they need to parent effectively. Bea has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. Also, she holds a Master of Science in Mental Health Counseling with the specialty of Applied Behavior Analysis. Bea and her husband have 2 children, Jacob, who is awesomely autistic, and Abby, who is simply marvelous. So, Bea, oh my gosh, welcome. I couldn't be more thrilled to be talking to you. So,
Thank you.
We're so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I feel like you are one of our most famous speakers. I know I said that earlier, but every time we say, Bea's joining us, she's speaking, everyone gets really, really excited about it. Because like I said, it's just the things you have, you're so well equipped, not only with your training, but just your personal experiences. Yeah. And so we're delighted that you're here. I would be remiss if I didn't also say that we are meeting today on behalf of and in thanks to the KdVS Foundation and their commitment to educate, increase awareness, and promote research for the support and enrichment of individuals living with KdVS and their families. So if you want to learn more about the KdVS Foundation, please take a moment to go to the website. It's kdvsfoundation.org and learn more. And just a bit of housekeeping before we dive right in. Thank you for submitting questions. I feel like you all are always wonderful about sending these in, and they're always really, really thoughtful. So thank you for doing that ahead of time. The first half of the webinar, we're going to get to know Bea just a little bit personally, and then I'm going to turn the screen over to her to share and discuss with you a sibling's perspective. And then the second half of the call, we'll take those parenting questions you submitted, and then if there are any others that come in through the chat, we'll be happy to open up for Q&A. You should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen that you can utilize, or you're welcome to type into the chat. The call is being recorded, and we will share the link after through email and social media. So without further ado, let's get on to the really good stuff. So let's get to know Bea. So Bea, I have just a few questions I always like to ask at the beginning of these calls, just so we can get to know you a little bit better and get you all warmed up before you take over the screen to present.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to the field of psychology, mental health? You became a cognitive specialist, just to go and get all this training. So I'd love to know what just initially drew you to the field. And then second part of the question is to actually creating a childlike mind. What kind of tell us a little bit about your journey there?
That's an interesting question. So I was drawn to psychology, I think, because I'm the youngest of 5. So I'm a lifelong behaviorist in terms of just watching people and learning about them and seeing, what's going on, what's happening. Like I'll tell you guys a fun story. When I was I don't know. I feel like I was in middle school. So I was 9 or 10 or 11, whatever age you are in middle school. I did this experiment in my household because I told my older brother, he's 3 years older than me. I said, you can't, there's no difference between like 2% milk or whole milk. Like you can't tell. And he said, yes, you can. And I'm like, no, you can't. It's the same milk. Like you have no idea. And he's like, I could tell. Like I could tell if my milk is slightly different. And the behaviors in me and also the little sister in me wanted to prove him wrong. So what I did, this was my very first experiment. This is when I knew psychology was calling for me. So what I did is I poured half of the milk out, which thank goodness this is like private and my mom can't hear this right now because she would be livid. No, I poured out half of a gallon of milk and I replaced it with water. So it was, I made it half and half. At least that's what I think or thought half and half was, or 2% or whatever that was. And I replaced it and I put it back in the refrigerator. And I had this log and I would write down every day. I would like day 1, he didn't complain. Day 2, no response. And the whole thing was finished. And it took about like, I don't know, a week or 2 to get through the whole gallon. And he didn't know. And when it was done, when my experiment was over, I told him, listen, I poured half of the milk out. And back in the day, okay, I'm going to age myself. Back in the day, you know, we didn't have phones and all that other neat, cool stuff. So I had the Polaroids that would like, you take a picture and it would come out. So I actually took pictures of me pouring out the milk, pouring out the half to have proof.
Oh my gosh, that's so great.
I actually did this thing. So that was my introduction to psychology, to your mind can convince you of something that is not true, that is not accurate. So I was just fascinated by this.
Wow.
And it just kind of made me want to learn more about this. It wasn't until I got to grad school that I decided to specialize in what we now call neurodiversity and special needs and learning differences, when I, you know, was paired up with a little girl that was on the autism spectrum back then. And I was just smitten by her. Like I was just taken back at the fact that this little girl learns differently. She was nonverbal. She was, you know, non-communicative at that point, but she could learn. And I was fascinated with, okay, so how do we reach individuals like this? Like, how do we make sure children and people like this are not lost in the shuffle and are always heard? So I just wanted to be an advocate for individuals who couldn't communicate, but wanted to say something because they're loud in their own way. So grad school really exposed me to autism, neurodiversity, fell in love with it. And then of course, life is not complete until you get it for yourself. So then years later, I get my son is born on, you know, he's born and he's on the spectrum. So then I feel like it's a full circle moment for me. You know, I knew who I wanted to be when I was, you know, doing that science project with my brother. I knew that. Like I knew this was who I was. I developed a passion with that little girl of understanding it. And then my son gave me the full picture. This is why this can work. This won't work. This is why it makes sense. This is what it truly means to be a special needs parent. This is what life looks like. This is the struggles, the pain, all the different, you know, insecurities, the worries. And, you know, like it gave me this different insight and it fueled me to say, I want to teach people about this. I want to teach you how it is a difficult life. You know, it is a hard life. It isn't something that any one of us take for granted, but I definitely want you to be optimistic about it because it's easier if you're optimistic about it. We could be sad, you know, and I have those days. So some days I'm like really sad, but I wanted others to understand it could be so much more. And that's kind of like how I started to create, but I created a childlike mind before Jake because I wanted people to, people to know that, because I've been working with special needs kids and autistic kids, and I'm like, these kids are beautiful. You just need to learn how to talk and communicate with them. Like, how do you connect with them? So I created a childlike mind way before Jake. And I think just, you know, the universe wanted me to have the full picture and now I have it. So, or at least 90% of the picture. I don't know.
That's so powerful because even just with the name A Child Like Mine,
Yeah.
my wrongful assumption was that that was inspired by your child. And you're right, it is very interesting how things work out sometimes.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
everyone thinks that,
Really
everyone
inspiring.
assumes it, but my husband is the person who can actually tell you. When I came up with that name, we were newly married, and we were in our little apartment, and the name just came to me. I can't explain it. Like, the name just came to me. And I said, oh, I want to call my company A Child Like Mine. We have no children, no child. And he said, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, no. Like, I want people to understand it's child like mine. Like, it's their kid, and I get their kid. And he was like, but you don't have a kid.
And you're like, no, this is it. And
yeah,
you just knew. That's so amazing. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. And that's just really, really, really powerful. And I think I really do feel that's probably part of why when you speak, parents are just so drawn to you, and because you can just tell. It's just the way that you share. You, like you said, it was really a calling for you, and then you have a passion, and then now you are directly connected to it through your child. So it's just it's really special. Tell us a couple other questions I want to ask you before we dive into your presentation. Can you tell us a couple of fun facts about yourself?
Yeah. Okay. I think this is the most interesting one. I'm from Orlando, Florida, and I've been to Disney over 100 times.
Oh my gosh. So you have all the tips and tricks on how to do Disney.
I can navigate. I don't need a map. It is like, this is the most impressive thing to my kids. You know, at this point in my life, this is what I've done that's so impressive. We go through Disney. I do not need a map. I'm like, okay, we get there. You take a right, and we're going to go to Tomorrowland. Then we're going to go to Adventureland.
I'm super impressed. So what I'm hearing is maybe we need a webinar before we all go to Orlando next summer that says we're going to first talk about something else, but then Bea's going to tell us how to navigate, how to get through Orlando and Disney.
Can I tell you, I have submitted lots of emails to Disney to say, can I write an article on how to do special needs at Disney?
Yes. Oh, that's brilliant.
Like, I've written to them several times. They have not responded, but you never know. You never know who's listening and who's going to be ready.
That would be brilliant. I love it. That is definitely a good fun fact. Well, I want to make sure we have plenty of time to get into your work and what you have to share with us. So I'm just going to turn it over to you to share your screen and any information that you want to share. And then once you have a moment to do that, then we'll come back together and talk through some of the parent questions. Does that sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
Great.
Here we go.
Perfect. I can see it.
Okay, good.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I'll skip. Well, you guys, thank you again for having me. I love the KdVS family. So I'm always humbled and honored every time I'm asked to do anything or asked to speak. So thank you. I hope this information is informative. This is my bio. So what I'll do is I'll send you guys a print of the PDF so you can send it out to the families, because there's stuff on there that is helpful in terms of information. What I wanted to do with this talk was to kind of add to it from my 2019, because I wanted newer information and more in-depth information, but I also wanted for anyone who didn't get to see the 2019 or be a part of it to also kind of know what is it that a sibling need and what they require. So obviously I have two beautiful souls that I've been blessed with to call my children. And, that's Abby with the purple hair. Yes, her hair is purple. And that is Jake, my muse. So I call them my muse and motivation, because they really give me the inspiration to do what I do. And so Abby is a sibling. So really this is about her. And she's definitely been such an inspiration and motivation to how to navigate this world, because she's chatty, Jake is limited verbal.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I love the purple hair. They're both so precious. Like, the smiles on their faces, they're just heartwarming.
They're genuinely, they have the best relationship, and I'm just jealous of it. There's no experiment happening with the two of them. So it's beautiful. But So these are my kids, and this, the whole sibling perspective in general was something. As my daughter became older, I definitely wanted to kind of learn and navigate and figure out, how do I make sure she is heard, she is seen, she understands that she is loved and well cared for, but also take care of the needs of my son. Jake is limited verbal spectrum. He's very little, he can't communicate very well, and he can communicate a lot. And he also has epilepsy. So he has medical issues on top of being on the spectrum. So his needs tend to be higher in terms of health than Abby's needs, but they both have the same emotional and psychological need. And I have to constantly figure out how to keep the balance of the two. Now, can everyone see because I don't know if, I guess everyone can see my, yeah, they can see the screen, right? You can see the screen just fine. Nothing's blocking it, right? Okay, I feel like everyone can see it, but I will share this slide in case.
I think you're good.
Okay.
It looks good.
Okay, good. So first and foremost, whenever we're thinking about, how do you start the conversation about special needs, it needs to be an open communication. Information is the most important thing when it comes to talking to your kid, your child, about their siblings and about special needs, and for them to be heard. So open communication is important, but we have to be mindful that about the information that you're giving. You have to remember that a 2-year-old cannot process the same information as a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or an 11 or teen. So it is really important. I can't turn my screen. Oh, there you go. It is really important that we understand that communication is done by age and how old each child is and where they are in the developmental spectrum. So this is Piaget. He is a psychologist that developed this cognitive stages of development. And it basically helps you understand where a child is developmentally when you're trying to communicate information to them. So 0 to 2. The issue with 2-year-olds, they're so chatty. If they're neurotypical means that they're typically developing. So if you have a typically developing child where they're hitting the milestones at the time and rate that they should, by 2, a 2-year-old is filled with language and they're filled with a lot of opinions. So you may confuse that with the ability to understand certain things and certain concepts when that is not true. So their world is really limited and they're learning a lot. So, most children on average, if they're falling on the neurotypical spectrum, they start to speak around 15 months, 16 months. And by the time they're 2, they look like they can take on a lot more information, when in reality, they're not. A lot of things are not fully developed. So there's certain concepts and things that cannot be shared with them. The next developmental stage is between 2 to 7. Now, this is a part where a child that age can actually do back and forth reciprocal conversation. They really can kind of empathize with, with what you're saying and understand, but we're still not where we need to be to introduce more complex situations and complex information. So we are talking about the 2 to 7-year-old age is when you can say, hey, your sibling's different, they're unique, they have different needs, but this is not the time to go into what those needs are, because they cannot conceptualize what it means. That at that age, that child still thinks and believes their sibling will have the exact same life that they do. So, and for them, they don't really understand or realize or recognize the limitations that comes with having a sibling with unique challenges. So 2 to 7, they can reciprocate, their conversations develop, but still not at the age where you can share deep conversations about more complicated, especially the medical issue stuff, because a lot of the time kids that age, if they don't understand what those things mean, they start to panic and worry about it. And we don't want to cause unnecessary anxiety on siblings, because that's something they will have just being around their sibling. So the next developmental stage is between 7 and 11. Now, you're talking about kids now that look grown up, they look adult. They look like, oh man, you really can have these deep conversations, and I can tell you this and I can share a lot with you. What's going on in this stage is, while they are able to take on a lot more information, they still are not fully able to understand what the future looks like. And the biggest reason for this is, and whether they're 11 or 12 or under 30, right? Frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex not fully developed, so they can't see past certain time frame anyway. So they really do have a hard time understanding how permanent a special needs is and how limiting it can be as well. But with these children, you can start to involve them more in conversation. And if your child, I mean, like my son who has epilepsy, I can explain now to my 9-year-old daughter what it means to have epilepsy, the medication that we take, why he takes medicine every single day, twice a day for his epilepsy, why we go to the doctor every year to monitor, why we have EEGs and all these different things. She understands that more and she's less worried about it because she can conceptualize it better. But still, I would not necessarily go into, he may grow out of it, because I wouldn't want to tell her something that I don't really know to be fact or true. So 7 to 11-year-olds, still young enough. Now, these are the children that are still, with the tooth fairies and all these wonderful things that they still believe in. So just when you're trying to have a conversation with that child, just realize cognitively and developmentally, what do they still believe? So if we're still in that fairy tale innocence age, withhold a lot of information, give them enough to give them a sense of security, but not too much to cause anxiety. Now, 11 and older, this is when you have, and depending on the child, sometimes a child could be 12 to 13. These are not concrete. These are just more of where most children fall in terms of like on the bell curve, like most kids are here. So these are the children that are here. If you have an 11-year-old that is, younger, this may not be for them. And you may have a 13-year-old and this may not be for them. So just keep that in mind and your child and really get an idea for where they're at. But the 11 and up, this is the theoretical, hypothetical, thinking, abstract logic, like they can take on a lot, and concepts learned in one context can be applied to another. So that would mean if my sibling, has Down syndrome and this child has KdVS, they're both special needs. So that's what we mean by being able to apply from one thing to another, where KdVS is just this, autism is just this, Down syndrome is just that. They can fluid and go back and forth and become more concrete. So this is when you really can share more information. You can share how their life would look like or will look like. You can share about what are your plans for the siblings, for when you want to retire. You can share how your sibling may not go to college. Your sibling may stay home. The conversation I'm now having with my 9-year-old, because I've been talking to her for years about, how her brother is uniquely him, is he may stay with us a little bit longer. She still thinks he's going to go away and go somewhere for college, and he's not, and that's okay. So we're now talking about how he may just stay home with us his first year. Again, staying within the innocence of where she's at, but also starting to introduce the reality of his story and her story are different. So obviously communication is the biggest thing, and being open and understanding where your child is at to talk about it. When you're talking to your child, and this is more for those 7 and up age range, because again, the younger ones, we don't really want to give too much information. They don't understand. So if you have younger siblings, they do not understand, give them limited information. But if you have older ones, the 7 and up, you have to have an open dialogue. You cannot pretend that, this is not affecting the other child, because it is. It is deeply impacting who they are, how they're developing, and all these different things. Not everything special needs is bad. And we get in the habit of, if your child is uniquely wired or special needs, or they can't do certain things, we make it bad. We make it something like we don't talk about. And that's not true. There's so many gifts that comes with having a child who learns differently, because they're teachers and they get to teach you how to do things in a way that you typically wouldn't see. You have to allow the sibling to openly say what they're feeling, how they're feeling. I do not like the word hate, but I will allow my daughter to say, I hate that, blah, blah, blah. Like she hates that her brother cannot go to the same school as her. She'll change her mind when she's a teenager, but for now it's a big deal. And she really wants him to be in school. I don't know why, but she really wants that. So she hates it. And I said, and I know why you hate it, and you want your brother with you, and you want that same sibling experience as your friend, but that's not what's going on. And I don't say that, he has his own life and you have your own life. I do allow her to truly say what she's feeling and let her sit in that space, and we work through it together. So make sure that you are allowing the sibling to be their true authentic self without having to refrain from being that. It is extremely essential that this is an ongoing dialogue. This is something you start at 2 and you stop at never. Okay, so this isn't something where we're at 18, okay, we're done talking about it. No, it is an ongoing conversation, because developmental stages change in life and people go through different things. So what you're feeling at 10 is not what you're going to feel at 20, and they need to have that relationship with you to be able to come to you about it. So there are some bad things for the siblings that happen. There are a lot of bad things, but I really wanted to talk about the ones that we can notice and do something about. Isolation. Many young siblings experience feelings of isolation when they're excluded. They're excluded from family member stuff, from sleepovers, from all these different things that we don't necessarily think about could be an exclusion. So they feel isolated, they feel lonely. That's something that most siblings experience when they have a special need. The guilt. I am not at the stage, and this tend to be more when the kids are older, during the teen years, where we're driving, we're going on proms, we're going to school, we're doing all these developmentally appropriate, socially acceptable, adaptable movements in life. That's our rite of passage. But the sibling is not, especially if this is a younger sibling and they're now experiencing all these things. And they feel guilty that they're not able to do those things. They also feel guilty if they do not have whatever the sibling have themselves. So there's this guilt of, why am I the healthier sibling? Why do I have all these different things? Like, why don't we share these? We share the same DNA, genetic coding. Why is that? So there is guilt. And again, allow your child to express these feelings without trying to reason them out of it. Sometimes a listening ear is way more productive than someone who's trying to present a solution, because they don't need a solution. They just want to be heard and just vent, really. So especially when they're surpassing a developmental milestone, Abby will drive before Jake. That's just the reality. She can read, she can do this, she can do that, where Jake cannot. So there's a lot of guilt that comes with that, where why am I getting this and he isn't? Why am I surpassing him and he's not? And she's too innocent at this stage of life to really get it. She just assumes, oh, he'll get it eventually. She doesn't know that he may never get it. So there's a lot of guilt associated with that, especially with, the teen years. Pressure to achieve. Most siblings have this idea that I now have to be the perfect child. And that's a feeling of coming from, this sibling is imperfect. And we don't ever want to convince or convey a child that their special needs sibling is broken or there's something wrong. They're just different. It's just a genuine difference in situation and personality. So they tend to want to be perfect, and they feel like they can't make mistakes and they can't do that. Also, special needs kids tend to have a lot of behavioral issues. And the behavioral issues, from my past webinar, we know it's communication. They're not really bad. They're just trying to communicate in a way that is maladaptive. But those behavioral issues causes the sibling to want to be perfect and not have any behavioral issues. And that is unhealthy, because what tends to happen, these same children, when they go off to college or in a space by themselves where they're no longer being watched, they tend to overdo it because you can't escape anything in life. If you don't do it now, you'll do it later. So we don't want a child to feel the pressure to be perfect and they're holding it all together where I get the perfect grade, I do this, I do that. I'm always constantly presenting in a perfect way. That's not what we want at all. We want a child to always live in the space and be comfortable with who they are and how they present, however it is that they want to present. So the pressure to achieve is, something that siblings experience. So what can you do? Help is on the way. What can we do to help these siblings? I cannot say therapy, therapy, therapy. My daughter's been in therapy since she was, I don't know, I guess birth by way of me. But therapy. I've outsourced a lot of my information to someone that I'm like, I could do this, but I'm her mom and I want to make sure I stay her mother, not her therapist or, her medical doctor or anything else that I'm not qualified to do. My qualifications are to be her mother. So it is so important that you get the sibling to therapy. It's not it doesn't have to be like an ongoing every month, every week, every year thing, but just a check-in, just to make sure that they feel like someone who is objective is hearing them and that they feel heard. It is best that the sibling also feels like they have a person that is just for them and not someone they feel is biased towards a special needs child. Honestly, it is difficult to be neutral as a parent. And my husband says this to me all the time. He says, it's very difficult for me to be neutral with Jake. I don't think that's true. But I can hear and see what he is saying. So you have to get someone who really is not, they don't have a dog in that fight. They really just want to be your child's advocate, the sibling's advocate, so they could feel heard, understood, and have a place to vent when they can't say something that, they might feel bad about. So I know this is about siblings. When I say make time for yourself, you will not have the ability to make time for the sibling if you don't make time for yourself. If you don't have the oxygen mask on yourself, you will not be able to see that your child is turning blue. It is that simple. So rule number one, make time for yourself. Then we make time for the sibling, because we have to be able to understand that one-on-one feeling, oh my goodness, there is nothing like it. I shared it in Utah 2019, how, because my son has epilepsy, we go every year to the Leving Children's Center and we do our overnight EEGs to monitor. And my daughter at a very young age thought this was a special time between Jake and I, like this was a wonderful little hotel stay. It was not. It is not a wonderful hotel stay. And when I saw this is where her mind was at, and this was her perception of the situation, she and I started Mother-Daughter Day on her birthday. And we do it randomly throughout the year too, but specifically on her birthday, she and I go to a local hotel and we just spend the night. Nothing has been more impactful to her than this. Her birthday's in July. She's already planned where we're going this year. She's, made some list of places and things we're going to do together, because she truly feels heard and she feels the lack of pressure and the lack of worrying, that she worries about her brother. She genuinely worries about him. Sometimes I would think more than me, because she'll worry about things that I don't think about. Abby is so precious. She told me, I know Jake better than you because I spend more time with him. So I know him, and you and Daddy, you spend more time with each other, but we spend all our time together, which is true. So we have to make time for the sibling, because they're always with their sibling or around their sibling. And my son has additional needs that take me away from her. So I have to figure out how to create some form of balance of the two of them. Sibling support. You guys know how much I love doing this with the KdVS family. I love seeing how these kids have grown and what they want to talk about. But sibling support, they need to be in a place where They feel heard, they feel understood, they can vent, they can complain, and no one is judging them, and no one is saying, but what about, don't worry, he has this, she has that. That's not the space for that. Sibling is a place where they can feel like they can say anything, do anything, and act any way without the judgment. So sibling support, highly, highly recommended. They're not always available everywhere. They're not, typically something you can easily access, but do some research. You may be surprised to see what's going on around you that they can join in. The thing with the special needs community, a neurodiversity community, the uniquely wired community, we all are experiencing very similar things. I have learned so much from the KdVS family with how similar some of the issues you guys are experiencing that I feel in my home, in my household. So yeah, so we're very much the same. So you should always take the siblings somewhere they feel supported, and also sibling support with the special needs sibling should support the neurotypical sibling. And whenever possible, take them to go see them do ballet or the movie or watch this or whatever it needs. Like, they need to know that, hey, he may not care or understand, but he was there. He was present. And I like that feeling. So make sure they're supporting each other, but also there's an outlet for them to feel supported. So these are some books I've actually had a chance to read and research in preparation for this, because I really wanted new information for you guys. So these are younger books because, again, the 2 to 11 stage is hard to explain, but the more you start to educate your child, the easier it will be. So Views from Our Shoes, Just Because, Being the Other One, Billy's Sister, I really, really like them. I read them, I have them, I like them a lot. And I've also given them to Abby. There's a book that she loves. It's about an autistic little boy and Little Big Sister, that's the name of it. That one's so specific to autism. I wanted to put that on here, but I'm like, that one's too autistic based. But if any one of you out there want to get Little Big Sister, highly, highly recommended. It is probably the best informational book I've ever read, Abby's ever read. She reads it every time we go on a trip. She takes it with her because it's very comforting to her. So Little Big Sister, it's not on the list, but it's something that I highly recommend. These are some websites that have, conversations about, siblings and what it looks like from the young age to the adult age, because we really spend so much time focusing on itty bitties and little. We don't think about, the 18 and up crew, which tend to be your child's caregiver, who will be in some shape or form your child's caregiver. So I definitely ask you to go to these websites and check these things out because they're so informative. So everything is going to be all right, right? Because I am the queen of optimism, and I don't like to live in optimistic because it serves no purpose and it's going to give you unnecessary wrinkles. I'd rather have a smile wrinkle than like frowning wrinkles. So just let's figure out how things going to be better. So here's the great news. These are done over and over and over in research. And what is it that kids of developmentally delayed individual siblings, what do they gain from this? Like, what are the benefits? Insight on the human condition, meaning these kids have so much empathy. The sibling that you have now have this level of awareness that neither you nor I possess, because we did not grow up with an individual with special needs, unless if you did, you have that empathy too. But I did not. I'm the youngest of 5 and all my siblings are, neurotypical siblings. So Jake is my real life first time living experience, where Abby, this is her story and her only story. And her level of empathy is, I can cry just thinking about it. So they understand the human condition better. They're better people. They mature a little bit further along because they now understand how to nurture and take care of. And that's a good thing. they have so much pride in what their siblings can do. Jake recently just finished the 5th grade and he learned how to write his name. And Abby was his biggest cheerleader. And she was like, Mommy, you have to record this. This is so fantastic. Like, take your camera. Let's take a picture of this. And I was too busy being in the moment looking at it. And she was just looking at it from this huge prideful ability of, look what my brother can do. And she was like, now he can probably write like a book, right? Right. So again, she's 9, but just seeing that pride in her and knowing that he couldn't do this thing and now he can. So she's his biggest advocate. I know I want to be, but sometimes I'm like, she's my competition. They're incredibly loyal to the family and their sibling, and they have a good amount of appreciation for their well-being and their health. That's something that adults have struggles with, and understanding how, none of health is not promised to us. It is a gift, and they understand that it's a gift and they appreciate it. So these are my babies. So this is Abby and Jake, obviously, in our backyard, and I just love looking at them. But I wanted to say that siblings are too important to ignore, because no one logs more hours and minutes with the special needs children than their brothers or sister, with the exception of parents, usually the mother. And Abby tells me all the time, I spend more time with him than you do. And she's right, because right now I'm not with him. So nurture that relationship, make sure that we're catering to it, and make sure that we're giving the siblings the need that they need in order to really, take on the responsibility of being our baby's caretaker. Because, when we depart this place, that relationship outlive us, and we want to make sure we leave a healthy relationship and not something that's negative or bad. So these are my resources, and thank you. So I am now ready. How do I get out of here? For your questions.
Perfect. Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I know
sharing.
I'm looking at all this, and I'm like, I need to go follow you on Instagram. I can help you stop sharing. Are you trying to stop sharing?
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Perfect. So, just a few questions I wanted to get into that we had here. I mean, and gosh, I have plenty of my own. You talked a little bit about how you do the birthday, and then that's one way that you really help Abby feel really special. That was one of the questions that came in, is just how to make the sibling feel special. And so I feel like you gave us a lot of tips, but are there any other ideas that you've seen people share of just little things they do that help their typical child feel special too?
So the birthday thing, it's pretty time consuming. It takes me away from my family. It takes me away from my husband, although the boys enjoy the time away from the girls. So they do like it. So it isn't something that everyone can do. What you can do, and this is research based, you guys, 5 to 10 minutes is all they need of uninterrupted time. No iPad, no phone, no screens, just you and that child. And if you have a teenager, I know what you're thinking. It's going to be awkward. No, it won't. It will be awkward at first, because they're going to look at you like, don't be weird. But just say, you know what? I just kind of want to be in the space with you for 5 minutes. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. And it doesn't have to be conversational. I think parents, especially, and I'm referencing the teenagers, parents feel like they have to fill the void of the silence. Like if their teenager's not saying anything, like, hey, what's going on with you? What's happening? Sometimes the silence is all they need. They just want the physical presence. So 5 to 10 minutes of just being in the moment, in the space of, hey, what's going on with you? Nothing, go away. I won't, but I'll just be here while I read my book, and I'll just be in the same space with you. So it's something like that you can do, and anyone have 5 to 10 minutes of that 2 to 3 times a week. That's how little it is to make such a big, impactful difference. So everyone, we all have that. But there's other things you can do. You can go for a walk. You can go for ice cream. I know when Jake was younger, and Abby's sensitive to noise, and he would really screech and scream whenever he was having a meltdown, she and I would go for a walk. So it became this, oh, he screams, me and mom bonds. So I was obviously conditioning her to know that whenever you're heightened and you feel like there's something wrong, here is a natural remedy for being heightened, which she actually now will do on her own, but have no idea why. So
Amazing.
you can exit the room. You can go for a walk with the sibling. You can go play a game. It's important that when the sibling is having this moment of, I can't regulate myself, that you try and figure out what can I give to the other child so they don't feel excluded. So there's plenty of ways. You can go for ice cream, you can go for a walk, you can read a book at the end of the day. So there's other options that may not be as intensive as, a hotel night stay.
Yeah, well, and I love what you're saying. I hadn't even thought about that too, but just that the situation where if they're unable to regulate and then the other sibling, normally you wouldn't see, or it wouldn't have been my initial thought of, oh, okay, well, I'm going to let my husband help my son. I'm actually going to take my daughter. And, well, I think, gosh, that would feel really good to her to know that I'm going to say, I'm going to actually step away from the situation with you.
Yeah.
And we're going to
instead
go
of sending you away.
Right.
Because that's the message. We don't recognize that's what we're doing, but we're basically saying this tantrum, this meltdown, this thing is way more important than you right now, and I have to deal with it. And you both do not have to deal with it. Like one person can tend to it. Yeah. If you have the luxury of two people and you have the blessing of two parents, use them adequately. Maybe it's, my husband that steps away with her, but someone needs to make the other one feel like you are just as valuable and as important to this family. And we will also give you equal amount of attention.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love what you're saying about, the 5 to 10 minutes of doing something simple. Our little girl loves the game Connect 4.
Oh my
She's
gosh.
about to turn 8. And so even last night, she and I played, and we only played for like 10 minutes, but we had a lot of fun, And so I think sometimes we can have a tendency, I know I can be this way, to kind of overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to be some big ordeal. And I also love what you're saying about that, because I'm thinking about the families. Now, I only have 2 kids, but I'm thinking about the family where there's multiple siblings to work with and to support. And if they can have those little things they do that are special to that sibling, even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes, that takes pressure off the parent and then still gives that child the attention. So I love that. I feel like that's such a great, seems so simple now that we're talking
now that
about
I've said it.
Now that you've said it. No, that's really, really good. The other thing that I love what you're saying too, even about the conditioning and creating this healthy environment so that it doesn't feel like something that's negative. I feel like that was also really profound, and that came up in the questions ahead of time. One of our families wrote in, how can we help the younger 4-year-old brother not feel ashamed of the older 6-year-old brother who needs diapers and is therefore sometimes referred to as a baby? So how do you help with those negative thoughts or shame?
Yeah, and this is one of those conversations where we both have 2 very developmentally young individuals. So we can't talk to a kid whose, prefrontal cortex is not developed. So we can't have that conversation. But what we can do is let that, let that younger brother know that, listen, he is going through something right now, but it won't always be this way. And everyone have different needs, because there are typically developing children who wear diapers because they wet the bed, because they have enuresis, or they have some kind of medical issue. And there's 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds who are typically developing who wear diapers. So it is not specific to your special needs sibling. It is something that is a medical necessity for this time where we are at currently, and it could last longer than what you're used to. When we make things medically based and not developmentally based, which a lot of, special needs kids, they have a lot of medical needs. Their brain can't communicate to their body to hold things in yet. So they have other stuff going on that causes a delay. And because that delay is like so apparent in early development, we panic and we're like, they're not
Yeah.
doing this thing where, they will catch up at the rate and state when they're supposed to. So take it to the medical route. Just say medically right now, this is where we're at. You may need braces. Does that mean something's wrong with you? You may need glasses. Does that mean something's wrong with you? This is just a medical need for now. And we don't know how long it's going to be. And if you tell a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old, the doctor said he needs it right now. Oh, okay. Like they're that simple, but if we're trying to say, well, your brother, he has, Koolen-de, and we want to make sure, you're making it way too complicated and giving them something they do not understand, because it just doesn't make sense.
What about, you mentioned this a little bit too during your talk, what about the jealousy component? Because I think it works the other way too, right? Where I think sometimes they get a little jealous that, maybe there's more attention. And it could even be things that you would think you'd never be jealous about, like taking medication or, so how do you recommend addressing that also, while keeping in mind that they might be at that younger age where they're not able to understand all the concepts and stuff?
Jealousy is it's the first thing that kind of makes its appearance. And I remember when Abby was like 3 or 2 and she was like, can I have autism too? Like, can I get it later? Are we giving it away or something?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wow, she sees it as something to have, like something that, she needs to have access to this thing as well.
Yes.
Jealousy it's a human emotion, and really jealousy is envious of the attention that person is getting. That child doesn't want the sickness or the medicine or anything. The child wants the attention. Anytime a child is saying something, let's look past what they're saying, but really, what is the behavior they're picking apart? And the behavior they're picking apart is, when you get medicine, that's an additional 20 seconds of mom time that I do not get. When you're having a meltdown, that is an additional 2 to 3 minutes that I do not have. So the best way to combat that is, okay, you know what? You and I can have a little special routine. How about every day we sit down and have a cup of tea together? While brother drinks medicine, you and I, we have tea or water. They're just asking for attention in the way that they have access to, which is, I want this thing too. And they don't. So really they're crying for attention and they want to be aided by you, whether it's you. And typically kids want the attention of mom. Mom is mom is a desired thing. So, and mom's the one who's the caregiver. I give the medicine, I give the shots, I do all the stuff. My husband's just chilling on the couch, just relaxing, having a good time. Shout out to the dads who are here today, but I'm just saying my mind just sits. But he's a wonderful dad, but I'm the default parent for everything. So when my daughter was asking for how do I get autism, it was, how do I get more time with you? Because it seems like Jake is taking all of it.
Point. That's a really great point. Yeah. And I could definitely see that. One more question I wanted to ask you in the last kind of 6 minutes we have here, that I think is a really important one. It came in about how and kind of when do you start to have conversations with your children about supporting and caring for the sibling, potentially into adulthood? When do those types of conversations start to happen?
That is a early adult, early 18 and up, because you can, obviously you can tell a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, but they're experiencing life right now. They're going through the motions of life. They're aware of it, but they may not understand how much of this is going to be a responsibility. What you can tell your teens, I wouldn't engage in tweens, because tweens are developmentally going through so much. It is an additional thing to factor in, right? And we have a lot of estrogen and testosterone, and you can't talk to those two things. So we're not talking to those. But when they've settled, and we're more settled from estrogen and testosterone, which tend to be 17, 18, and we're calming down, this is when you can let them know, what do you have in place? What support system do you have in place? What support system have you researched? What special needs trust, if you're going down that way, do you have? What's the housing department? What state? Where do your child have their Medicaid, if that's, know if that's something you're qualified for. You can start to let them know, so this is the plan and this is what it would look like. What basement will this child live in? Whatever it is, once that, so they can also feel like, oh, okay, I'm just going to step in, but I won't have to figure it out.
Correct. That's a really good point. I'm even thinking about, we have talked, a number of us as parents, and, we've had different conversations around planning. I think we've had speakers before about that, but, I'm thinking about that. That's probably a really good thing to think about in our planning, right? If, like you said, whether you're doing a special needs trust or whatever, but just to write those types of things down, because, I will say this jokingly even to my husband sometimes. I'm like, would you even know how to, order the shots? Do you know what number to call? And we'll say it jokingly, and then he says back to me, would you even know how to pack the lunch in the morning? And I'm like, no.
No, I'm sleeping.
But I'm thinking, gosh, that it's a good reminder that we get in our routines of caring for our children or our loved ones, and we don't really even think about all the things that we do every day that in our absence, heaven forbid, someone would have to figure out to do. So, it probably, even as a part of this conversation, wouldn't be, and check me on this, but a bad thing to just write some of these things out so that when the time comes and you do have to have a conversation, to your point, it's a pretty good plan in place.
It is. It's something I always have like these folders of doctors, like everything that you need. I'm like, in case I don't make it, in case I'm not here again, like, here you go. Here's all the information. And I recently asked my husband, I'm like, I really need to know because he has a 401k, I have my own, like all these different things. I'm like, I need your information. And he's like, I'll give it to you. I'm like, dude, if you die, I'm going to bring you back to life, and you're not going to stress me out. Like, this is not a thing that you're going to stress me out about. But it's, it's a morbid conversation, but it's a part of reality. And having something in place, whether it's a planner, whether it's a folder, whatever it is, that all that information is easily accessible. And you can't, especially in our world, like the world that we live in the world of special needs, we all know none of us, we're not dying. None of us here is going to die. Like, we can't die. It's not an option.
No.
We opted out of that.
It's not part of it.
Yeah, but but the reality is we can't have our way. So that's the biggest fear I know I have, and I know that my husband is experiencing, and I can kind of see Abby developing that as well. Like, well, who's going to take care of us? Who's going to make the lunches?
Yes,
so having something written down, a plan where everyone knows where it is, it actually relieves more stress than it creates. So I highly recommend that.
No, I think that's really, really smart. Well, I know we only have a minute left, and I feel like I could talk to you all night. It always goes so fast. But I'm so appreciative again of you just taking the time. The information is always so helpful, and I always pick up something new every time I hear from you. So I just wanted to say again how much we appreciate it. And, before I completely close us out, is there anything else that you wanted to say to the group tonight?
Well, thank you. Definitely want to say thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone next year. And I'm really looking forward to talking to the siblings and connecting with them again. But what I have a YouTube channel, and I always say, enjoy your unique parenting journey. This is such an incredible, journey we're on. It's joining a club that you didn't even know you wanted to be a part of. So, we're all in this together, and it's difficult. We have highs, we have low. Make sure you have your tribe together. Make sure you're reaching out. Make sure you're putting the oxygen mask on yourself, but also tending to these siblings. They tend to be ignored in a way where we're like, oh, they're so resilient. They have it all together, when they do not. Keep them informed, get them therapy, talk to them, open conversation, 5 to 10 minutes. These are little takeaways that you can do. But most importantly, keep that relationship alive and thriving. No one, and I actually believe it, no one knows that sibling better than the sibling. They just log in more hours. They really do. And there's this saying, if you want to know how to treat a special needs child, look at their sibling. My goodness, that is the most accurate thing.
Right. That's it.
That is exactly the most accurate thing. And Abby shows me all the time how to treat Jake. And sometimes I'm like, you can't say that to him. And she's like, yes, I can. Yes, I can, mommy.
I love it. I can so relate to what you're saying. Well, we appreciate you. And I just want to remind everyone, I know you mentioned that you can make some of your information available. You're on pretty much all social media channels.
I try to be.
And then she has a website, and check me on this in case I get it wrong, but it's www.achild, so ACHILD -likemine.com. So achild-likemine.com. So if you go there, you can learn more about Bea. You can follow her. But again, just thank you to you. Thank you to the KdVS Foundation for continuing to make things like this possible. And then thank you to all of you families who tuned in either here on the WebEx or through Facebook. We really appreciate the participation and the engagement. And we'll look forward to connecting with all of you again soon and talking to Bea again in the near future. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye.